the nervous system is bidirectional, and waiting around for good sensations, good feelings to emerge rarely works.
This video by Andrew Huberman beautifully illustrates a shared, universal aspect of human nature, our collective desire for happiness. Regardless of who we are, where we come from, or our personal circumstances, each and every one of us, in our own unique way, seeks happiness. We may not all define happiness in the same way or see the same things as sources of happiness, but our longing for a state of contentment and joy is something that brings every one of us together. And so this video sheds light on the important role that self-awareness and understanding our surroundings play in this pursuit of happiness. It nudges us towards being more in tune with ourselves, paying attention to our thoughts and our feelings, and being more aware of the environments that we live and operate in. In doing so, it emphasizes the importance of growth and adaptation in our quest for happiness.
And so what you do matters, and what you don't do has an impact also.
One of the key insights from this video is that happiness is a complex, multi-layered concept that can't be easily defined or measured. It ain't a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. Every individual experiences happiness in their own unique way. What makes one person happy will absolutely, well, I guess I shouldn't say absolutely, will probably not have the same effect on somebody else. This brings a very personal, a very human touch to the idea of happiness. It dismisses the notion that happiness is a fixed standard or benchmark. Instead, it encourages us to explore and understand what happiness really means for us, on a personal level.
I think that outside of like real clinical depression, I do think the statement that, happiness is a decision holds some merit. Actually, when I was a postdoc, I remember my advisor saying, happiness is a decision. I was like, how can you possibly say that?
Yeah.
But I actually think that happiness is not a decision. I think happiness is a series of action decisions, right? It's a series of things that you do. And so this is why rituals are really good. This is why getting into action, despite some feeling of friction about those actions, can be really, really good, because you start to discover the bidirectionality of behavior and these chemicals. Sure, the chemicals drive behavior, but behavior drives the chemicals too. And one thing, it's a little bit existential, but it's worth mentioning, is that the nervous system, which is basically us, right? You can take away any other element of our body and we'll still persist, but our nervous system is, especially the part in our skulls, is really who we are, right? It's our life experience. It's actually even shaped like us. If you were to melt away everything else, the nervous system is actually the one thing that actually looks like you. Everything else is just organs and stuff pieced together, tubes. The nervous system is absolutely who we are and can be shaped by the way that we think and approach things. But once you start to kind of ratchet into that a little bit, you start to realize, oh, it really is bidirectional. And you can start to experience that once or twice. Okay, I was feeling miserable. I think it's very healthy, by the way, for people to feel their feelings. I'm just not a big believer in extreme catharsis where you take out your feelings on people or yourself. That's not good, right? There are also feelings that can amplify themselves. We know this, right? If you really, really ramp up happiness, it can escalate to mania. You really, really, drive down into the trench of sadness, you can hit depression. And there are points where we have options along the way and we can feel those points, right? So there's a real thing there. But it's absolutely true that if you can experience what it is to be in a place of like kind of down in the dumps and get into action, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's sunlight, maybe it's learning or something, or feel agitated and push through that, you discover the bidirectionality. And if you can start to discover the accelerator on your focus and on your energy, and that you can come off that, and that can be good too. And there are ways to calm yourself down, and you can work with that too. When you start to realize that there are these levers and buttons that you can press, but you press them through sensation, perception, feeling, thought, and action, but mainly through action, you come to the conclusion that neuroscientists came to a long time ago, although they never actually stated it clearly, so it's kind of on them that we're only getting to this now in 2021, which is that there's no fossil record of you. There's no fossil record of the nervous system except your behaviors. All of us will go into the ground. Everything except our skeleton will disintegrate. Whether or not you believe in one thing or the other is not the topic of discussion right now about what happens to you next. But the fossil record of you are your behaviors. It's the book you're going to write. right? You'll be long gone. That book will still be here. It's the things you said and the ways that it impacted people. It's the tools you built. It's the ways you helped people. But there's no fossil record of emotion. Let's say you feel miserable. It goes nowhere. It circulates in you. It was designed, again, I say designed from the evolutionary perspective in this case, or maybe, who knows? I don't speculate about like higher order things because how could I? I always say I wasn't consulted in the design phase. So I'm not in a position to speculate. But whatever people believe, like if you feel something, intense sadness, and you do something useful with that, then there's a fossil record of that. It has the opportunity to be transmuted, as you know, the yogic and more certain cultures would say, it's transmuted into something. If you don't, it went nowhere. It just was recycled in your nervous system. The same thing with ambition, right? Or if you're just ambitious and you don't do anything with it that's focused, it goes nowhere. So the reason that thought appeals to me is that it means that when we are feeling miserable or when we're feeling fantastic, it's still about what we do with that. And that includes speech, but it also focuses us toward the discoveries we make as scientists, or the music we write as musicians, or the things we write, or the ways we raise kids. Because if we go back to the very beginning of this conversation, what kids are exposed to, that's a fossil record of our behavior.
For sure.
But it's about behavior. So when people, sometimes people ask me about like, what do you think about the collective and like transgenerational trauma and things? I don't know. I really don't know. But what I do know is that how we behave with one another shapes each other's nervous systems, especially with younger generations. And so what you do matters, and what you don't do has an impact also. And so understanding that the nervous system is who we are and that the fossil record are our behaviors, I think should feel empowering. I hope it doesn't feel overwhelming to people. It should feel empowering.
Andrew Huberman takes a balanced and insightful look at the relationship between money and happiness. It's a common saying that money can't buy happiness. And while there's truth to that, it's not the complete picture. The powerful insights reveal that while money in itself may not make a person happy, it can provide resources and opportunities that lead to happiness. For instance, financial stability can reduce stress, and being able to afford recreational activities can bring joy and relaxation. Money also allows for social interactions and experiences, which can contribute to one's happiness. Bottom line is that wealth isn't a direct ticket to happiness. Like, you won't get enough money and then just you're done, woo. But, it can undoubtedly make the journey towards it easier.
Regardless of whether or not people were doing something they enjoyed or not, boring to them or not, the degree of presence to what they were doing was a stronger predictor of their happiness in that moment and overall than was anything else. And also a fairly rare feature for most people. So it seems like it's something that we do need to work at, perhaps nowadays, as you point out, more than we perhaps had to in our ancestral past. One of the most remarkable things to me about the human brain is our ability to be present or think about the past or the future or the present and the future. And one sort of has to wonder then whether or not our challenges in being present, whether or not this is some subconscious refusal of our own mortality or something, right? That if we were to really contemplate our mortality on a regular basis, not just when we're marking off the weeks of the poster, we wouldn't be able to be present because it's kind of overwhelming.
One of the standout messages from this video is that we have a substantial degree of control over our own happiness. This highlights the role of personal responsibility and proactivity in our pursuit of happiness. It helps us to make changes that can improve our happiness levels. This could be anything from making our living spaces more comfortable and inviting to improving our ability to focus and concentrate. By highlighting this, the video encourages that we seek happiness, and we see it as not just an emotion that comes and goes, but as a skill that can be developed and honed.
To what extent does our subjective narrative,
the story we tell
ourselves, actually mean something for the body? And to what extent does the body actually mean something for the subjective narrative? The old narrative, meaning 10 years ago, was that if you're feeling depressed, just smile. Well, if that worked,
right,
we would have a lot less depression than we see out there.
Right.
The brain and the body are constantly in dialogue. So, the idea that when we're depressed, we tend to be in more defensive type postures. When we're feeling good, we tend to be in more relaxed and extended postures. All true. But it does not mean that just by occupying the extended posture that I'm going to completely shift the mind.
Right.
That's a first step. Think about two interlocking gears. It's one gear that turns the other, but then they need to kind of dance together before you can get the whole system going. There is one way in which subjective thought and deliberate thought is very powerful over states of mind and body. Can you think your way out of the ice bath being cold? Thoughts happen spontaneously all the time. They're popping up like a poorly filtered internet connection. But thoughts can also be deliberately introduced. For instance, right now, I can say, okay, have a thought that just decide to write your name, and you can do that. I'm going to decide to write my name, and you can do it. So that's a deliberate thought, which says that you can introduce thoughts. So I think it's very hard to control negative thoughts directly by trying to suppress them. Generally, they tend to just want to continue to geyser up all the time. But we can introduce a positive thought.